Tell me how the hell a fictional story about an octopus made me laugh out loud and bawl like a frickin' baby. Because that's what remarkably bright creatures did to me. And I don't appreciate it. So this story is told from multiple points of view. The main one is from this very elderly lady named Tova, who is like freaking the sweetest woman you will ever meet. She is a saint. She is nothing but kind to everybody. She was married for like 50 some years, lived in the same house with her husband. She had a son named Eric. Eric unfortunately went out one night and never came home, and it turned out that he passed away, and the police ruled it as intentional, that he unalived himself, but it never felt right to Tova, his mother. Then, she lived and lived and lived, and her husband then ended up passing away from cancer about 10 years before the story takes place. And she works at this aquarium in Washington, where we meet our second point of view. And his points of view are usually pretty short. It is Marcel. He is a giant Pacific octopus who had been very gravely injured when he was younger, and then was brought to the aquarium to recuperate and was not released because they didn't think he could survive. And he is extremely smart, and so smart, in fact, that he can read, and he can read fingerprints and he remembers every fingerprint he's ever seen. So he's very, very smart, and he is very fond of Tova because Tova has caught him outside of his enclosure, because he's an octopus, and octopuses are notorious for getting out of their enclosures. And he ended up getting wrapped up in some cords and couldn't get loose, and he was loose. He could only hold his breath for so long. So he's out of water. His body is deteriorating. She finds him and helps him get back into his aquarium. And then instead of ratting him out, she just covers it up and, tells him to be careful from now on. And even though he doesn't obviously talk back, he understands that she could have ratted him out, and she didn't. So he appreciates it. And then she gives him little treats and stuff. So he realizes, oh, she's nice. So then the third point of view is from Cameron, this 18-year-old who had a very hard life. His mom dropped him off at his aunt's house when he was younger, and then never came back to pick him up because she was dealing with substance abuse issues. And when he is an adult, he finds a clue as to who his father might be, and it's some rich tycoon in Washington State. So he decides to go up to Washington State and tell this guy, look, you better pay me for all the child support you missed out on, or else. So he goes up to Washington State, and life happens. What I really liked was how Tova was just such a sweet, caring soul, even though she had a lot of hard knocks in her life. Everybody that she loved had died, and now she's in her 70s, maybe even late 70s, and she's wondering, who's going to take care of me? She slips and breaks her foot, and she's like, who's going to take care of me when this happens again, or when something worse happens? And she's struggling with, how am I going to finish my life? And then we've got this young Cameron kid who's like, how am I going to start my life, get my life on track, because he's a complete and total mess himself. And then we have this octopus who we think of as just an animal, and he sees so much more from his little aquarium than the people living do. and, you know, helps create connections. And it was just this beautiful, sweet story. It got very, very sad at times, and you get very frustrated for Marcel because he is towards the end of his life as well, and he has been able to keep track of how many years in captivity he has been, or how many days in captivity he has been, and how the average lifespan of a giant Pacific octopus is. And he realizes that he's coming to the end and that his body is starting to fail him. And so he's talking about, you know, how the struggles that he's having in the end of his life, and it kind of mirrors the same kind of thoughts that Tova is having about her life. And it just is very, very touching and sad, but at the same time really sweet. And it does have a semi-happy ending, but it was just fabulously written and gives you all the feels. So I really enjoyed this book, and I think that a lot of people will enjoy this book. But if you can't handle kind of melancholy books, you might not want to read this. And it doesn't have, like, there's not a lot of action in it, but it's a story about life, and life isn't always about action and things happening. Sometimes you just kind of go with the flow until at the end you're able to look back at everything that's happened and be like, oh, now I see. And that's kind of what this book is. It's really, really great though. It's really great. And the Marcel is hilarious. The way he disses the other animals in the aquarium, he trash talks quite a bit. He's quite funny. So what other kind of books would you recommend that have made you kind of been like, huh, and where the animal has had more humanity, or made you take a harder look at humanity than the humans in the book? Kind of like what Marcel did for me in this book. Put your recommendations in the comments. I would love to be able to check them out. And remember that you are enough. You are also a remarkably bright creature. And go get lost in some pages.